Jimmy Armijo Grover here from Gallatin River Guides in Big Sky, Montana. Today we're going to be tying Kelly Galloup's hare's ear in a beadhead version, as you can see. Old pattern, or the standard hare's ear is an old pattern, fished every river in the United States, trout river in the United States and probably in the world, honestly, some version of it anyways. Mostly imitates mayflies, but can also imitate a stonefly. And in some cases, it might look enough like a caddis. And the hook I'm using on this particular fly is a Dai-Riki 305 size 14. Lighter gauge hook. He uses the lighter gauge hook in most of his. You can also, if you want a stouter hook, go to Dai-Riki 075, which is a similar shaped hook, but much stronger. And then I have a copper Cyclops bead 3/32 here for this size. Tying this on with an 8/0 red thread here. This is a Vivus. Rusty brown is the color that Kelly Galloup uses on most of his patterns, which is also a nice color. You can, if you want to add some more weight to this fly, you can tie this with a tungsten bead versus this brass bead, or you can add a few wraps of like 015 lead or non-lead wire. I would say 5 to 10 wraps will really add quite a bit of weight to this fly. First thing we're going to tie in is Hungarian Partridge, and I see I've selected one of the larger body feathers here that has some brown markings in it. I really like this feather because I don't use it a lot for other soft tackles, so it's not dipping into my soft tackle inventory, and I like the brown markings as well. Here you can see I have those tips nice and even. And Kelly Galloup likes the length of the shank for his tail length, so we're going to get that position to my right hand, swap it over to my left, get that secured right at the barb of the hook there, and then I'm going to advance my thread all the way up to the bead. Now I'm going to get some Krystal Flash. Got some pearl Krystal Flash here. Good color for all of these patterns, but you could also play with that some. Sometimes like to have an olive colored Krystal Flash for the olive hare's ear, etc. So something to experiment with if you choose to. And what I'll do is I'll double that Krystal Flash around my thread, and then line up the two tips, and then just secure that right behind the bead. And now I'm going to keep this on top of the hook, and then take my thread back to the tail tie-in point here. And then from here we're going to dub the abdomen. And Kelly will use a touch dub method for the abdomen. I like a little cleaner, more slender abdomen, so I'm just going to use the standard method of dubbing for this, but we'll do a touch dub technique for the thorax so we can get that buggier look up front. This hare's mask dubbing, olive hare's mask dubbing, is buggy enough, in my opinion, if you just spin it onto the thread. Not that his version does not catch fish. It certainly does. It just doesn't fit my personal aesthetic as well. So my aesthetic is coming before the fish, but both methods or both types catch fish. So now we're going to build a little bit of a taper here, so thinner towards the rear and then getting thicker as we get close to the bead. And we're going to wrap up about 2/3 of the way up the shank. I added a little too much dubbing, so I'm just going to pinch some of that off. And I'm going to get my 2 strands of Krystal Flash, and I'll twist them a little bit to try to hold them together. Wetting your finger a little bit can help with that process. We're just going to get a few wraps through the abdomen here. And then tie that off up front. Trim it off. Next, we're going to get a few strands of Peacock Curl. I like 6 to 8. You maybe even want more if you want a more significant Wingcase. And I've trimmed off the tips here. The very tips of Peacock Curl will be pretty fragile, so I want to get rid of those, and this just helps also even it up and make it easier to tie in. I'm going to wrap over that. Now I'm going to wrap over the abdomen a little bit because we want our thorax to be a little bit bigger. Now I have some hairline low tack wax. I like this low tack for this purpose. You can certainly get a tackier wax as well. It might help you get the dubbing to stick on a little bit better, but I find this low tack stuff to do the trick for me. And I'm going to wax about 1.5 inches of the thread here. So I got that waxed well. Now I'm going to take a clump of my Hares mask dubbing, and I'm just going to touch the waxed portion of my thread here. And really try to get as much dubbing to stick to that wax as possible. And then we're going to start to wrap the thorax. You'll see immediately that gives you a much buggier look. See if we can get that to refocus there. And then I might kind of stroke those fibers back as I move forward, but just be careful as you move through this not to push away any of those fibers. And I like to build up a little thicker thorax than that, so I'm going to add a little more dubbing or wax and a little more dubbing just to build that up a little bit more. Because we're doing a touch dub method, some of those fibers are just going to be loose and come out pretty easily, so having some extra material in there will ensure that you have a good looking thorax as you fish this fly. So I like that much better. I'll take my Peacock Curl, lift it up. I also like to kind of splay out those fibers a little bit. Makes it look a little bit fuller. Then I'm going to lift those up, and I don't want to crush them down too much. I want a nice flat wing case, so I'm just kind of preening them so they spread out a little bit more and make a nice wide wing pad here. And then we're going to secure that right behind the bead. A couple wraps on top. Take a wrap or two in front, and then we're going to trim that off nice and clean. Last thing to do is, you can certainly build up a little bit more of a collar there if you want, and then do a quick whip finish. A very thin head cement would be appropriate for this fly. UV Flow is a good UV resin for it. Maybe put some on top of the Peacock Herl as well. It'll seep in and add strength to the fly. Peacock Herl is very fragile, and always thread wraps will have a tendency to break. That's a pretty significant red collar there. I really like that hot spot on my patterns. Sorry, just adjusting that a little bit. I think it helps it to fish better, but there might be some situations where you want a more natural look, so you don't need to go quite as big on the collar, and also using that rusty brown thread would give you a more natural look.